If you want to become a successful graphic designer, if you want to become a successful UI and UX designer, and if you are curious to know about marketing, if you are curious to know about power of networks, if you are curious to know about metaverse, then this particular podcast episode is only for you. Hello friends, welcome to the NKM Show. I'm Nitish Mishra, and in this episode we have Philip Vandusen. He is the CEO of Verhaal Brand Design, and apart from this, he runs a YouTube channel with over 247,000 subscribers. And in this episode we are going to talk about graphic design, UI and UX design, power of networks, marketing, metaverse. And I hope you will enjoy this episode. I hope you will learn something. And here's the conversation. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And I've been watching your content from such a long time, and I've learned so much from you. So it's like pleasure seeing you and talking to you right now.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Natisha. I appreciate it.
So, sir, how did your creative journey start? Like, I've watched, I think all of us have watched, you are talking about how to start your business, how to start your graphic design journey, but I haven't really heard about your origin story, So, how did all start? Tell me something about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, that could take the whole podcast, but I'll try to
Yeah.
I'll try to say it in a reasonable amount of time. Well, first of all, I'm not trained as a graphic designer. I never went to school for graphic design. I learned everything that I know on the job. And so I actually went to school for fine arts. I have my master's degree in painting,
Yeah.
and I was a fine art painter and used to teach painting and drawing in university when I first started off. And then I was teaching in the south of France and I came back to the United States and decided to move to New York City, and I started my own t-shirt company.
All right.
And so I started putting the artwork that I did when I was teaching in France on t-shirts and selling them in street fairs and walking around the city and selling them to boutiques. And so I really got to appreciate kind of the more business side of art. And so I loved seeing my artwork on people's chests walking down the street. And I also, really loved, making money selling products with my artwork on it. And so I eventually went to work for one of my competitors and was a designer at about a $5 million a year t-shirt company that was located in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I was doing color separations and artwork and t-shirt designs for them. This was at the very dawn of the Macintosh age. So I started doing their catalogs, print catalogs on the Mac. We were designing t-shirts on the Mac. And I started to really love doing t-shirt design.
Yeah.
And so doing graphic design in general. I was learning what, Adobe Illustrator could do, the first Photoshop could do. And I loved the idea of selling graphic product on apparel. And so I worked for that company for about 5 years and worked my way up to art director, where I was actually managing other designers. And I realized that managing other designers was a lot like teaching, except the money was better and you weren't out of work every 9 months when school let out. And so I started understanding that I really loved graphic design. I really loved managing people. And so I worked for that company for about 5 years. And then I went to work for a licensing company where we did licensed t-shirts for the NFL, football teams, baseball teams, Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes and things like that. And then I jumped to a new company called Old Navy, which is owned by the Gap Incorporated, right when Old Navy was starting off. And I went in as a senior designer. And I stayed with that company for 11 years. And I worked my way up from a senior designer all the way up to a vice president of design, overseeing graphic design, textiles, packaging, CAD design, color, etc. And so that's where I really learned most what I know about the business. So I was in the fashion industry for about 15 years.
Wow.
And then there was a big restructuring and I got laid off. I got laid off after 11 years, not fired, just laid off.
Yeah.
And was without work. So I made the conscious jump over to the agency side, and I became an executive creative director at a large a global agency located in San Francisco. We did a lot of consumer packaged goods. We did a lot of brand identity work. We did strategy, social media, marketing, etc. And that's where I really learned the agency business. So I'd been working at a very senior level, but on the client side for 15 years. And then I made the jump over to the agency side, and I had to learn kind of the agency business very quickly at, very senior level. So I was learning brand strategy and how to manage larger teams and how to work with multiple clients, because I'd been working with a single client as a senior creative inside a corporation. But now I was working with, 5, 6, 7 different clients on different projects simultaneously. Wow. And I was also developing multiple projects. We were doing brand identity, we were doing strategy, we're doing consumer insights work and focus groups, and juggling lots of clients all the time, traveling. And it was really exciting, very fast paced, and a completely different kind of vibe than working on the client side. And then the downturn happened, the big .com bubble, and I got laid off as the company contracted, and I went to work for another large corporation agency, Landor Associates, and moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and worked with companies like P&G and GE and National Geographic and Cisco Foods, big corporate clients, doing brand identity, et cetera, the same sort of stuff. Then I made the jump back over to the client side and became the vice president of global design for snacks for PepsiCo. So that was a big role, global role. And I really enjoyed that. I was working on brands like Lay's potato chips and Fritos and Doritos and Sun Chips and stuff like that. Lay's potato chips, some of your viewers or listeners might not know, Lay's potato chips is actually the biggest food brand in the world. Yeah. It's in over 50 countries. Yeah. And it was just a fascinating brand to work on because it was so international and so global. Mm. And so then I kind of burned out. I kind of met a period of time where I'd been working like crazy, long hours for a number of years, moving from state to state to take on new roles. And I really just kind of hit a wall, and I started questioning whether I really enjoyed what I was doing anymore. And so I decided to take some time off, and I quit. I left PepsiCo, and I took about a year off and experimented with a bunch of stuff, tried to get re-inspired in what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I decided to start my own consultancy. Yeah. So I started my own agency. When I was on the agency side and the client side, I realized that there was a big change happening in the design industry. And that's that there were a lot more virtual agencies or consultancies popping up, where it would be 1 or 2 kind of principal people, and then they would have a group of freelancers or partners under them that all worked remotely. Yeah. And they would come together for a project, but then disband kind of after that project. So it was a very flexible model. And I was using agencies like that when I was at PepsiCo. I was seeing agencies compete with us when I was at Landor. And so I noticed that the industry was really changing. And it also enabled consultancies to work with global clients and scale up and down very easily, depending on the projects that they were doing. And so that's the kind of model of a consultancy I decided to do. I reached out to about a dozen people that I'd worked with in my career, and I decided to say, "Hey, I'm starting this agency. It's going to be a virtual agency. If you guys want to work projects with me, would you be open to working with me if I pull in projects or clients?" And lots of people said yes. So that's when I started kind of reaching out and developing new client relationships on my own. Now, here's the big thing I want your listeners to understand, and that's that I'd spent my whole career, 25 years up until that point, working with big global corporations, the Pepsis, the Coca-Colas, the GE, the Johnson & Johnson, the big corporations. And when I went off on my own as a consultancy, I didn't want to work with those clients anymore. I kind of been there and done that, yeah. Right? I wanted to work with entrepreneurs and small to medium sized businesses, and really businesses that I could help and that could move forward very quickly and who could really leverage what I could bring to the table in a way that would really move their business quickly.
Yeah.
And so I knew that none of my contacts and none of my people that I knew were going to help me get new clients, because all I knew were the big corporations and the people who worked at the big corporations. So I started doing content marketing. So I started a newsletter, and I started putting out a newsletter every 2 weeks, started an email list, and sharing things that I knew and articles and videos and stuff that I found inspiring.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, I started a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I'm going to put out a video every week for a year.
Yeah.
Every Monday, I'm going to put out a video. And so I started putting out a video every week for a year. And then after a year went by, I said, I'm going to do another year. And so I did. And I just said, I'm going to share everything I know. I'm not going to be guarded about it. I'm going to share everything I know about branding, strategy, design, marketing, everything I've learned in my career, I'm going to share for free on YouTube. And hopefully people will see that I know my stuff, and they'll come to me and try and want to work with me. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So people started searching me out and saying, hey, I saw your video on YouTube. I have this project. I have this small business. I have this brand identity. I'd love you to consult with me. And I started getting clients that way. And that's how I developed my client base.
Yeah. So actually my next question is we all know that this graphic design industry has going on for a very long time. You are also in this industry from the last 25 years or more than 25 years. All right. But I feel one thing that in the last 2 years, a big change has come in it. In graphic design, in UI and UX design, in coding, in content creation, So what do you think? What is the reason of that?
Well, let me ask you a question. What do you feel has changed? What do you feel is new?
Yeah, so basically, I feel one thing that a lot of people want to pursue this profession right now. A lot of people want to get into this industry right now, which I've never seen that. I mean, what is the reason of that?
Well, I'll tell you the reason. The reason is, and there's a great quote by Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm sure you've heard of. Gary Vaynerchuk said, every media today has to be a media company. And what has happened is, and this isn't really in the last 2 years, more like in the last 5 to 8 years, but companies now, every company has to be on the web, right? So every company has to have a website. They have to have social media presences on multiple platforms. They have to be putting out content, videos, audio, podcast, social media graphics. They have to be updating their websites regularly. They should have an email list. So they should be putting out emails and content. They should be posting, graphics on their websites. Every company, to a certain extent, in order to market digitally and be seen these days, has to be, to a certain extent, a media company. And so companies need graphic design and creative professionals more than they ever have in the past. Meaning, every single company in the world needs to have a digital marketing arm. They either need to have it full-time people in-house, or they have to have a whole group of freelancers that they hire outside. And those people will be doing, social media writing, posting, social media content, repurposing, graphic design for thumbnails, for carousels, for video, for audiograms, for podcast artwork. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on in terms of the types of visual graphic media and creative media, audio, video, writing that's needed for any company to operate now. So what's changed has companies used to be able to operate by, they put out an ad in the newspaper and in magazine, and then maybe take out a radio ad and if they were really big, they'd take out a television ad. That would be their marketing. But now it's every single day they have to post, update, create media, create content to be seen and to grow and to build a customer base. So that is the need that's changed, is that the explosion of the need and the opportunity to make a living as a graphic designer or a creative professional is is better and easier now than it's ever been because there's such a huge need for it.
Yeah, so now I got it. And actually, now marketing has become one of the most important part in every industry. And I think 5 years ago or maybe 6 years ago, people did not take marketing so seriously or did not have that much awareness, I think. But now marketing has become one of the most important part in every industry. And now every industry needs good marketing. Then they can survive for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that marketing has always been important. I mean, from the time that someone was at a street fair selling bread, they had to have a sign on their booth.
Yeah.
I mean, marketing's always been around since the beginning of time. But what's really changed is the breadth and the number of different ways you can market.
Yeah.
Meaning, it used to be 20 years ago, there was TV, there was print, there was outdoor, and radio. There were 4 different kinds of media. And now there are about 200.
Yeah.
Meaning there's paid media, promotional media, which is paid advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, Twitter ads, LinkedIn ads, Instagram ads. There are video ads on YouTube. There are video ads on Vimeo. There are about 1 million different platforms and 1 million different ways you can go about paid media. Now, that doesn't even take into consideration attraction-based media or content marketing media, where you are producing content, original content or curated content, and you're posting that regularly to build an audience, build followers, build recognition and engagement with your audience. And that is it's a long game, meaning it takes a lot of time to do, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort to do it. But if you are successful at it, it's a completely different vertical of marketing than has ever existed before.
Yeah.
And because it's resource intensive, it's media intensive, and it's time intensive, but its returns are great. So a lot of companies marketing has gotten a lot more complex. It's also gotten a lot harder to track. So it's gotten harder to track the analytics and the success of what you're doing because it has become so complex, because there are so many moving parts. And that doesn't even take into consideration e-commerce or your website traffic, retention, website, the how people are traveling through your site, what they're actually engaging with. Lead magnets. I mean, the complexity is massive. That's this huge change that's happened. And as much as any marketing person, department, or agency thinks they have it all figured out, they don't, because it's changing every single day at light speed.
Yeah, that's great. So one thing that every designer wants to know, is degree important to become a successful graphic designer?
I think that it used to be. And if you're going to work for an agency or a corporation, there is a legacy of, human resources, the people who do the hiring, who want to see they want to see a degree. And but the thing when you're a creative that's almost more important than a degree, and that is because they want to see some basic level of education that you can write, that you can interact, that you've got a basic portfolio and skill set. They can trust that you've got that skill set. Now, that said, in order to become a great graphic designer or to get an education in graphic design, you don't have to pay for a 4-year degree anymore. There is enough free information online, on YouTube, in content around the world that if you are determined to do it, you can learn graphic design and how to be a creative professional for free online. But you have to really, really kind of hunt down the best resources and do it. And then you have to build a portfolio on your own. Now, is that easy? No, it's not. And is it going to take a little longer maybe to get there? Possibly, but you can do it for free and you can build the skills that you need to survive and make a living without having to have a 4-year degree.
So as a designer, as a graphic designer, how can we enhance our skills? What are the best ways to enhance our graphic design skills once we get into this industry? One of the best ways, and graphic designers don't really do this that much, and this is something that I took away from the fine arts, from when I was a painter,
was that one of the ways that you learn to be a better fine artist is you copy other people's work. And you see this if you go to a museum, right? You might see an artist in there sketching from some painting or sketching from a sculpture or copying a painting. And by copying work and recreating really great design work, you learn what went into creating that thing and also the decisions that that person made in creating it. And it doesn't seem naturally apparent to graphic designers that they're like, oh, why would I want to copy this other piece of work, until you do it. And then when you do it, you start to learn about why that person did what they did, why those color relationships, why those balance relationships, those layout ideas, those layout decisions that they made when that designer was creating that piece. You start to learn those things. You also are challenged with like, oh, how did he do that? How did he get that color in that photograph? How did he do that filter? How did they isolate out that text on top of that image? How did they create that effect? And so by trying to recreate something, you have to go out and learn what it is that actually technology was that they needed to put that together. And so I recommend that designers who are just starting off, that they study the great designers, and then they try to recreate some of the work that really inspires them. Recreate the work that you see that you were really inspired by, the sort of work that you want to do when you become more accomplished. So that's one thing. Recreate the masters and learn from it. Another one is you really want to expose yourself to as much inspiration as you can. I am a voracious consumer of inspiration. Going on design websites, Behance, Dribbble, Pinterest, just immerse yourself in graphic design and imagery and this sort of stuff that really lights your fire and gets you excited. Because the more and I'm also a big proponent of print. So, I mean, subscribe to Communication Arts Magazine or to Design USA, or there are a lot of print magazines that are great as well. And you can read them cover to cover, learn about the industry, learn who's out there doing what. And that's going to educate you in terms of the sorts of design that there is. That's another thing for beginning designers, is that a lot of beginners don't really understand what are the breadth of things that you could make a living in, right? When I was in the fashion industry, I had to hire graphic t-shirt designers. And the Old Navy graphic t-shirt business was a $700 million a year business. It was a huge business, right? And so I had a team of 20 graphic designers. And it was hard finding graphic designers who were good and who did t-shirt design. Why? Because no schools teach t-shirt design. Very few people even knew it existed as a job that they could have and make a really decent living in. So I had to go out and find illustrators, or I had to go out and find, different types of, or fine artists, and say, hey, can you learn Photoshop? Can you learn Illustrator? Because I need a certain kind of designer who can put type and image together on something that looks cool on a shirt. And these people would come in, they go, wow, I didn't even know that this job role existed. And so by going out and really learning what are the different, there's app design, there's print design, there's packaging design, there's motion design, there's audio design, there's video editing, there's video special effects, there's social media design, there's thumbnail design, there's audiogram design. I mean, there's game design. I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on in terms of all of the different types of roles that are available for creatives. You never really know as a beginner what it is that you want to do, or what is even available to you that you could make a living in. So you really want to kind of become a student of the industry. You want to become a student of all the different kinds of designers, all the different kinds of industries that use design or use creative. So you can nurture your own curiosity about what you might want to pursue, because there's so many different things that you could pursue.
Yeah, so I can totally relate to this because I am also a graphic designer, and when I started this graphic design thing 3 years ago, I used to recreate all the designs. I picked some designs from Google, I picked some design from Behance, and I used to recreate that. And that's how I learned the Photoshop tools. That's how I learned the Adobe Illustrator tools and Figma for that matter, Adobe XD for that matter, you know. So I think this is the best way to learn graphic design. Yeah, so I can totally relate to this.
One of the other things I'll say is that when, there are a ton of free resources, right? But there's also some paid resources that are really inexpensive, but give you a huge opportunity to learn the software, right? So part of, being a creative pro these days is learning the software. You have to learn Photoshop, you have to learn Adobe Illustrator, you have to learn, Adobe Premiere, possibly video editing. There's a million different apps that are required as a designer, InDesign, etc. I'm going to make a quick plug for I work with a guy named Bring Your Own Laptop, Daniel Scott, who's he's a certified Adobe trainer. And he has a website where he has video training on Adobe products. And the subscription for this website is $12 a month. I mean, it's nothing. And I mean, even for, India or developing countries, $12 a month is relatively affordable, right? So if you're really saying, I mean, if you compare it to like what it would cost to actually go to school, and
exactly,
and you can learn any of your favorite Adobe programs, and I'll give you a link. This is an affiliate link, so I get an affiliate fee, but it's BYOL.me, so .me/Philip, PHILIP. And if you go to that address, you can sign up for Bring Your Own Laptop courses. Money well spent. Daniel's an amazing guy. He's a friend of mine. And if you've ever seen any of my graphic design trend videos for the last 2 years, I feature him in that trend video as a little plug. But anyway, amazing way to learn Adobe software. And so my whole point in going down that road is that there are a million free resources out there, yes, but there's also some really high quality paid resources out there that are very, very affordable that you could also explore.
All right. So my next question is what do you think about internships? Like, do you feel internships help designers to get a better job with a degree or without a degree?
Yes. I'll just say yes. Interns, any job that you can get, paid or unpaid, especially if you're just starting off and you can get an unpaid internship, I mean, ever. But when you're just starting off and you don't have any real world experience yet, and you get an opportunity to do an internship with a company, do it. Because there's no better way, faster way to really understand or learn the reality of what the creative industries are like until you start working with somebody, whether that's someone like me, who's a consultant, who has a team of external people, or whether it's a small agency where, you're helping, process files or file things or create presentations or slideshows or something like that. You get exposure to what the projects are, who the clients are, what they're actually delivering, the sort of work that takes to do it, how many different skill sets go into doing something. Because that's another thing a lot of early designers don't realize. They think I go to work for an agency and it's just full of graphic designers. It's not. If you go to work for an agency, it's got finance people in it. It's got strategy people in it, has business development people in it. It's got designers in it. It's got production people in it. It's got account managers in it. There's all sorts of different levels and skill sets that go into, running an agency. And a lot of people who are just design focused and just have those blinders on in terms of, I just want to do graphic design, they don't understand the larger business workings of an agency or the largest business workings of working with clients. And so by doing internships, you start to get exposure to that stuff. And that's exposure that you would never get any other way. So I'm a proponent of internships, preferably paid, even if it's just a little bit of money. But definitely, if you can work with a professional as you're just starting off to get exposure to real client work, real clients, that real business process, definitely do it. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's great. And this would help other designers too. So basically, a lot of designers have this kind of mindset, Like, I also don't work for free, but I did some work for free because I wanted to learn some new things in the real world,
Yeah. And the other thing is that, Natish, is that you meet people. And you're not going to, one of the things I try to tell people, it's like who you know, not what you know.
Yeah.
Most of the jobs in your life are going to come from
Yeah.
relationships, not from sending your
Yeah.
portfolio or your resume out to people. Because now applying for jobs online is like throwing your resume or your portfolio into a black hole. Like no one ever sees it. It's read by bots, and there's 10,000 applicants for every position. You are going to get a job from someone that you know, someone who can put your resume or your portfolio into the inbox of the hiring person. And so by working in internships, you get to meet people. You meet people who actually
Yeah.
work in the industry, and
Yeah.
you keep that relationship warm. So after you do the internship, you send your manager an email every once in a while and say, hey, it was really great working with you. If you need any help with anything, I'm here and I'm available. Here's the thing that you have to understand. This is something I want your listeners to know. This is one of those things that I learned this is one of those things that I learned very late in my career that I wish I learned a lot earlier. And that is that the people that you know who work at companies don't stay at that company forever. They move around, meaning if you get to know 4 or 5 people at an internship at one agency, right? 3 years from now, 4 years from now, those people will be working at different companies. So they're not going to be working at just one agency. You're now going to know people at 3 different agencies. So if you keep those relationships and those people that you know in contact, you stay in contact with them and pay attention to like where it is they're working on LinkedIn or wherever you can see where they're working, then suddenly your world gets broader and broader and broader. And over time, your range of colleagues and contacts and your network suddenly covers client-side companies, agency-side companies, different, someone who's a designer might go into account management. Someone who's a designer might become a video editor. Everybody grows, changes, moves. So nothing stands still. So every time you get an opportunity to meet people at some place you're working, keep in touch with them because that's how your network's going to grow.
Yeah. So, sir, who is your inspiration? Like, what other resources or people you look up to get inspired?
That's a really interesting question, Atish, because I think throughout my career earlier, specific designers, Saul Bass, Marty Neumeier, some of the greats were the people who inspired me, but I don't really look at them that much anymore. Who I get inspired by is not necessarily a designer as much as it is that particular piece. So I'll get inspired by, what's happening in website design, or I'll get inspired by what's happening in motion design, either a category of design I'll get inspired by, but I'll get inspired by a particular piece or a particular package or a particular ad. And I don't really follow individual designers as much as I did in the past. So that's a tough question to answer.
Sir, that's completely fine. All right, sir, no problem. So, sir, as a designer, I wanted to know one thing, like how can people start getting clients in this field, like in graphic design, according to you?
Well, that's a very good question too. As I said, one of the best ways to get clients is through networking, through other colleagues. And so meeting new and other creative professionals who do what you do and also who do what you don't do. Meaning, if you're an UX designer, you might want to get to know some graphic designers. You might want to get to know some web developers. Because if you're a graphic designer who's just meeting and hobnobbing and hanging out with other graphic designers, they're your competition. They're not actually going to be bringing you work, right? You want to start working. You want to start getting to know people who do what you don't do, because they're the people who are going to go, oh, I have this project for this video, but I need some static graphics for it. Oh, I know Natish, right? He does graphics. And so networking and getting to know and meet and stay in contact with other people is where most of your work is going to come from. One of the things that designers think is that, oh, I've got to go out and I've got to cold call a bunch of businesses, or I've got to, cold email people on LinkedIn who are, run these small businesses that I want to work for. Chances are when you're just starting off, you have a greater chance of getting work from someone who's a creative professional who needs help on the project they're working on, than directly from the client. So that's why I'm saying when you're just starting off, it's actually better to start focusing your attention on building your network of colleagues and just being really obvious with them and saying, hey, I'm just starting off and I'm looking for, if I can help you out on a project, if I can contribute to some project where, you need a little extra bandwidth, I'd love to do that. Because if you have very little portfolio, very little experience, getting larger projects as a solopreneur is going to be tough. The other thing that I recommend beginning designers when you're just starting off their careers to do is to work for, and I don't know if they have these where you live, but they do in the United States, and I know they do in the EU, in the UK, is they have what's called temp agencies or staffing agencies. And these are companies that specialize in providing short-term freelance talent to agencies and companies. And the big companies will come to this staffing agency and say, hey, I need 5 freelance designers really quick. And these staffing agencies will already have freelance designers that they've vetted. They've seen their portfolios. They know they're talented. They know how much they charge. And they will hire you out to that company or that agency. And so you get paid as a graphic designer, you get paid from the staffing agency. You don't get paid from the agency or the company you're working for. But here's the really great thing about that. Number one, there's a lot of staffing agencies and they're always looking for talented designers. Number two is you don't have to go out and get the work. They get the work. Yeah. The work comes to them and then they say, okay, we're going to send you out to this job. We're going to send you out to this job. And so it takes it out of your responsibility as a graphic designer to have to find clients because the staffing agency is essentially your client and they're finding the work for you. The other huge advantage of doing this, Nitish, is that, especially at the beginning of your career, is that you're going to get farmed out. You're going to get hired out for a month to one company or 6 weeks to another company or 2 days to another company or an agency. Yeah. And you're going to pop in there and you're going to have to freelance for a couple days, but you're going to meet people there. And then you're going to go to another agency, which is a big agency, and you'll meet people there. And then you'll go to this little company and you'll meet a couple people there and you'll get a lot. You'll be able to build your network of colleagues and contacts really quickly. The other thing that's really important is that you're going to be able to see what it's like to work at all sorts of different agencies and companies, different sizes, different specialties. And you're going to be able to understand where you might be comfortable. Because what's really hard is if you are just starting off and you take a job at an agency and let's say they're a web development agency and you take a job there. You got to work there for like a couple of years, right? 2 or 3 years to show that you are a decent employee. But you may come in there and within a couple of weeks go, man, this agency really stinks. I really don't like web development work, or this is too fast paced for me, or it's too slow paced for me. And so you would be really unhappy. But now oh man, now I got to stick it out for 2 years. So I build my resume. Well, that's, that kind of stinks, right? Because then you're stuck at some place you don't want to be. So working for temp agencies in the beginning anyway is great because you get to dip in without committing to any number of different companies. So you can find out where you like to work and where you wouldn't like to work. Do I like the agency side? Do I like the company side? And that's one of the great ways to get into the industry without having to commit. And you learn a whole lot and you can build your network really quickly.
Yeah. That's great. So, sir, what do you think, which is better for designers, freelancing or full-time job?
At the beginning, here's what I'm going to say. At the beginning, temp agency stuff, if you can work for a temp agency and get into a lot of different places in temporary situations, that's great. But I would or get a full-time job at an agency or in-house at a company when you're beginning. Because don't go right from learning or going to school and becoming a freelancer. A freelancer in terms of like having your own agency. And the reason why I say that, I've actually just recently kind of changed my opinion about this. I had a conversation with James Martin recently, who's a great illustrator, about this. And that's when you get out of school, you don't know anything. Like you don't know how the business side of it works. You don't know how the industry works. You don't know how pitches work. You don't know how competition in the agency world works. Like you don't know anything. You think you do. You think you know everything, but you don't. And so by going to work for an agency or a company and and learning through experiencing things through other people, seeing how people communicate, how they pitch, how clients act, how projects work. That's where you're going to really learn so much about the industry. And you can't do that on your own. Like if you go off and start your own agency right out of school, it's going to take you a decade to learn that stuff. And if you go in and work in an agency or a company, you're going to learn that decade's worth of stuff in like a year or two. And so that's why I recommend at the beginning of your career that you work for somebody else before you go off on your own.
Yeah. So, sir, once I gain 1 year experience or 2 years experience, so what do you think? Is there more scope in full-time job or is there more scope in freelancing? Like I'm asking about the money factor.
Okay. So you're talking about income. You will make more money as a graphic designer. You will make the most money inside of a corporation or a company. You will make slightly less money in the agency side, but it will be more interesting. You will work. And here's the trade-off. When you work in a company, you are working on one brand, maybe two brands, right? And you're doing stuff so your portfolio after a couple of years, say you go to work for a company that makes batteries. Okay. And you start doing battery advertisements and battery social media and battery presentations and battery packaging. Everything in your portfolio after 2 years is going to have to do with batteries, right? And so if you go to work for an agency, but you're going to get paid a lot of money because it's kind of boring, right? And because battery companies make a lot of money. So, or you can go to work for an agency where it's a little more feast and famine, but you may work on batteries for 2 months and then you're going to go work on cat food. And then you're going to go work on a travel agency. And then you're going to go work on aircraft engines, right? So you're going to get a lot of variety in the kind of work that you do. But because you get so much more variety, more people want to work in agencies, so they pay you less. Not a lot less, but the stress is higher, and the payment isn't quite as high as it is when you work in-house. But you get so much more variety. But here's the thing: in 2 years, when you get out, you're going to have a portfolio that's got beer packaging in it and cat food and batteries and travel and aircraft engines. And you're going to have a huge variety of work of stuff that you're getting to work on, right? So there's pluses and minuses to both. In terms of how much money you can make between freelancing or having your own agency and working for another agency or another company, that kind of depends on how successful you are, what kind of clients you have, how much you charge for what you do. But the difference is that, when you're working for an agency, you're working for a company, you get a steady paycheck, that you get paid every 2 weeks or every week, right? When you work for yourself, you get paid when you get paid, meaning there are times when
you will get clients or something, then
you may get a lot of work this month, and then in the fall when things get quiet, you don't. Or then, people go on vacation and it's like no one's calling you. And so it's very up and down. And so at the beginning, I have to say, it's a lot more comforting when you're starting off your life to know that you're getting a paycheck at the end of the week to be able to pay your rent. Right?
Exactly.
You like being able to pay your rent.
Exactly.
And if you're freelancing, you're going, hey, that's great. I got paid all this money last month, but I don't have any clients for this month. And rent, it's going to be hard to pay for the utilities bill. And so at the beginning, I personally feel a little higher comfort level with, working for somebody else, because then you got a paycheck coming in.
Yeah, that's great. And this is a very practical way of thinking.
I know that's really funny, because I've never been asked that question before. And that's a really great question to ask, because it's true. And that's the reality of it, It's the agency world, the freelance world is feast or famine. And when business is good, it's great, but you better be socking those nuts away, because winter's going to come and it's going to get quiet at some point.
All right, so my last question for you is what do you think about Metaverse? How Metaverse will open the opportunities especially for designers?
Okay, so the Metaverse is anyone's guess, meaning it's so new and it's not even a reality yet. So everyone's trying to figure out what it's going to be. What everyone really knows at this point is it's going to be some sort of Minecraft kind of virtual arena that we're all able to interact with each other with some sort of avatar, in virtual reality. And so what that looks like is anyone's guess at this point. Yeah, Facebook has put out some visualizations of, what things are going to look like.
Yeah.
But in terms of opportunities for graphic designers, it's going to be huge, meaning anything that exists in the real world, signage, packaging, apparel, virtual environments, in-store stuff, graphic designs, print, apps, anything that exists in real life is going to exist in a different way in the metaverse. So graphic designs for the metaverse are going to basically create, I started off this interview talking about the 10 million channels of marketing that we have to address, right? Businesses have to address as creatives. Metaverse is going to then 10x that, right? So not only are you designing t-shirts for real life apparel, you're designing them for someone to wear in the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
I think also it's going to introduce things that we don't even know yet, right? So are people going to be wearing normal clothes in the metaverse? Are they going to be wearing crazy costumes? Are you going to be able to become, a giant ape? Is that you're going to be your avatar, right? In the metaverse with a football helmet on? Who knows?
Yes, sir.
So, I think it's anyone's guess. But what I would say is on the large scope of things is that it's going to be a giant brand new digital graphic opportunity. And we'll see what that ends up looking like.
Yeah. So I hope things will go the way you said, And
we'll see.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me for this episode. And I hope to see you again.
Thanks, Natish. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, go to Philip Vandusen on YouTube or philipvandusen.com, and you can find out everything you need to know.
And you can find this link in the description also. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Thanks for having me on the show.